And a very good afternoon to you. It has just gone midday on Friday, the 29th of November, 2024. Yes, this is the midday show. And it's Phil Dave here without Russ, as you can see. Russ is off having a very well earned break from today's show, but he's not having a break per se. You see, he is actually working elsewhere. Outrageous. I know. What are we going to do without him? Well, we're going to carry on regardless. We're going to carry on the great conversation. And actually, the conversation is something that I would very much like you to join into, because depending on how you are viewing this, you may notice that there should be a little link underneath where you are viewing that says join the show on the screen. And that's what I'd like you to do. It's very, very straightforward. There's a little link, you see, that you just literally copy and paste into your browser, and you'll be able to jump on and join in the conversation. Now, I know the question is, what conversation are we talking about here? Robert Van Buren says, hello, Phil. I say, hello, Robert Van Buren. How nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Excuse me. This is not the day for me to discover this. I think it's all the cold weather. But I've got one of those, I don't mean scratchy throats as if I'm getting a cold, because it doesn't feel like that. But you know when you can't clear your throat, and they're doing this old man impression of constantly going all the damn time. Drive me absolutely bonkers. So I have to apologize in advance if at any point I have to take a slight pause in proceedings to do that. I can only humbly apologize. However, I very much hope you'll stick it out with me for the next hour. Later on, business as usual, Chantal Rickards will join us and go through some of the delights that we can look forward to this weekend on the box and also in the screen as well. Now, I have to tell you, speaking of this weekend, this is very exciting for me. Are you ready for this? Okay. This weekend is the first weekend that I'm officially not working, not because of holiday leave or anything like that, because my job has changed. So officially, the first weekend that I'm not working in, I reckon, 3 years. So I'm very excited. I've got my weekends back. It's very nice. Francois Pascal, a very good afternoon to you. Bon après-midi. It's lovely to see you. And she says, hello, Phil. Lovely seeing you. Mwah. It's lovely to see you, Francois, as well. Feel free to join in, Francois, if you're up for it, if you feel like it. I've got the links out on display for anyone to copy and paste and join in the conversation. It'd be very nice to have your thoughts on the show. So it's very simple. I'm actually going to put the link up on screen as well. So if you want to join in the program, you're very welcome to do so. I think actually what I will do is I will actually tell people that's what they're doing, because otherwise they'll look at this and say, what on earth is that load of nonsense? So there we go. Are you ready for this? Sorry, I should be able to multitask really, shouldn't I? There you go. Lovely. That's it. You won't be able to click on it, I'm afraid. You'll just have to either copy and paste it from the comments below, or you can ultimately type it out manually if you want. Not too long-winded a conversation or URL, I suppose. Anyway, I digress. So yes, I was saying that this is the first weekend I've got back. And I was toying with the idea of what I should be doing with it, really, because it's been such a long time since I've actually even had a weekend to do anything with that, well, I'm a bit flummoxed, really, a bit taken aback. I don't know what to do. I'm in a bit of a dilemma, I suppose. I think on Sunday I'll probably just do a lot of chilling out. That's long overdue. It's been a bit of a manic week. Speaking of manic weeks, actually, there's one thing in particular that has driven me absolutely crackers, okay? It's the state of the transport. Do you know, of all the weeks, I know that this is the day when we find out our Transport Secretary of 5 months has stood down over some sort of controversy, quelle surprise. However, the problem is that I'm afraid that transport in this country is just so diabolical that just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, oh, guess what? It got worse. So I don't know about you, whether or not you've had the misfortune of having to use the trains this week at all, but the weather has been very much a deciding factor. The way that it has managed to successfully mess up so many train services from all over the country that I and my colleagues elsewhere where I work have actually really struggled to get in on time. So much so, are you ready for this? On average, it has taken me 2 hours every day to get to work. I might as well be traveling from Brighton. Isn't it ridiculous? How is it possible? And I know this has always been the case. I think a lot of people believe that this is just a recent phenomenon in the UK, but of course it's not. We all know that transport has been up the spout for a very, very long time. It was always the butt of the jokes, really, wasn't it, about the transport system? Want to get somewhere on time? Don't use British transport. Simple. I suppose I really should have taken that on board. Eve Phantom says, hello, Phil. Eve, you'll have to forgive me. I say hello, obviously, but I'm afraid I simply can't do it in the way that Russ does. You know, he does the whole crazy name, crazy girl thing. It just hurts my throat. And as I said at the start of this, my throat's already a little bit sketchy this week, so got to be careful on that. Oh, yes, I was saying, I think that might be the cold weather that's done it, but I can't clear my throat. It's driving me mad. But anyway, it's quite all right. I digress. Yes, so in terms of sort of what we're talking about, sorry, I'm going all over the place here. It's just nice to see you and actually get to speak to you. But I think that this week, I wanted to try and sort of talk a bit about things that are out of our control, that get us a bit down or a bit annoyed, because that's sort of how I feel about public transport. I know this is very trivial in the grand scheme of things, and believe me, I'm well aware there's much worse going on in the world than the trains not running to time. I do know this, I promise you. I'm not completely insensitive, but the truth is, however bad things are in the world, life does go on, and people try and carry on as best they can, right? But of course, we can't carry on, because it seems like there is some sort of concerted effort from above to stifle freedom of movement in the UK, not from outside the UK, in the UK. It's very, very strange. We sort of have gone to this, our sort of an inverted version of ourselves. We used to have so much freedom in this country, and yet it was quite tricky to come to the UK. And now it's sort of gone role reversal. Now, we don't need to go down the route of immigration or anything like that. It's quite heavy, and we don't need to do that. But in terms of actually talking about getting around on a day-to-day basis, look at how many cars there are on the road. Now, I know full well that you might be forgiven for saying, well, it's because there are more people here now, and actually the number of cars. No, if you actually look, statistically speaking, I don't think there are many more cars on the road now than there were actually have many years ago. I know that sounds strange, but the number of vehicles hasn't necessarily changed. What has changed, this is interesting, is how easy we make it for those vehicles to move around. That's what has changed a lot. I don't know about you, but how many more, I'm sorry if you're not a driver, this is going to be a bit boring, but just bear with me here, right? I don't know about you, but how many more sets of traffic lights do you see everywhere on the roads now? Literally, so you can't even go a couple of blocks without a traffic light stopping you in your every track. And not to mention, of course, those traffic lights are very badly phased. You drive up, and then you see another set in the distance. But of course, they're already turned green. So by the time you get to them, guess what? You have to stop again. It's almost like there's no fluidity of cars anymore. Not to mention here in London, we've obviously got congestion charge and the ULEZ, which of course we all know are just the biggest cons on earth for a load of tax. I don't care what anyone says. You know, you can't tell me for a second that congestion charge has helped with congestion. What would help with congestion is to remove redundant traffic lights, remove as many restrictions as possible when it comes to parking so that people can park, because no one's ever really given it any thought, have they? If you're restricted as to where you can park, that's yet another car on the road driving around trying to find parking somewhere. So that's a problem. And not to mention the poor handling of roadworks all the blooming time. It's absolutely bonkers. And as far as I'm concerned, if we solve that, how much happier would life be? You get in the car or in a cab or a bus or whatever route of transport you wish to take, you can just get to where you're going on time, as arranged, as maybe sort of you have in your mind, according to whatever schedule you may keep, and we just get there. There's a nice thought, isn't it? And it wasn't that long ago. It used to be like that. As I say, I'm well aware that British Rail hasn't always had the best reputation, shall we say. But it doesn't mean that things were that unbearable to get around. And they just seem to be now. As I said before, 2 hours to try and get into the office. I just think it's crackers. I only live about 50 minutes away. If everything goes swimmingly, door to door, I could be at work in about 50 minutes. But no, 2 hours it took instead. And I'm afraid that with things like that, it's really trivial things actually play, I think, quite a poignant part in one's day. It's the difference between realizing that it's a good day and a bad day, because what you're doing is you've made the framework so difficult, if you like, of that day. It just sets you in a bad mood. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. Graham Pack, by the way, says, I drove into Central London yesterday and there were roadworks everywhere with temporary, I'm assuming he means temporary traffic lights, but it's fine. Graham, you're actually quite a vocal sort of chap. You know, you're always very good at commenting. I think it's high time we actually got you on this program. So, oh, there you go. Yeah, he said, with temporary lights, it was a nightmare. Join the program. You can see the link at the bottom of the screen. That's for absolutely anyone and everyone who wants to join me before Chantal comes along at 12:30. You're very welcome to just jump on the program and have a good old natter. Because I was working on something yesterday evening. So after I'd done the day job yesterday evening, I was working on a project, which at the moment I'll just keep on the download just because I probably shouldn't even mention this much, but I'll do it anyway. And the idea was supposed to be about bringing back the art of conversation, because it seems that so many people in this day and age have forgotten how to converse. Not any of us here, obviously, on Midday Show. I know that we're all a very chatty bunch and we're absolutely good at saying we agree with that, we disagree with that. That's great. That's the way it's supposed to be. But have you noticed in most everyday life now, if you say anything that someone either takes offense to or someone maybe decides is not quite, shall we put it, acceptable, I think is the best way of putting it. They bound it with some word, some ism of some description, whether it's sexism, racism, homophobia, whatever the heck they describe it as, right? There's always an ism to shut down conversation. And that's just what it does. It's designed to shut down conversation, to make you and someone else you maybe feel like a bad person, when actually all you're doing is expressing an opinion. So I'm trying to make a program. Again, I've said too much. I'm trying to do something about it that basically says every opinion counts. Okay. And it's true. Opinions are just that. They are a frame of mind. It may be something you've been brought up to believe, rightly or wrongly. It may be something that you and maybe your family have always felt is the case. You know, I'm just using these as sort of very patchy examples. But the bottom line is, you have to be able to converse. You have to be able to hear other people's opinions, even if they're not palatable. I hear some abhorrent opinions in my line of work. I don't have to agree with them, but if I didn't hear them, then they'd go underground. They might become more dangerous. And not to mention, it would also mean that I'd actually become stuck in a rut. I'd be very one-track mind. And I don't mean like that. Thank you very much indeed. But it means that I wouldn't know about other stances because I'd be that narrow-minded. It's not a way to educate yourself. Mark Elvis Hampson says, and might I just say, Mark, very good afternoon to you. Afternoon, Phil. Must admit, I've been in a pub and everyone is indulging in their mobile devices and no conversations. I know, it's shocking. It's really, really shocking. Do you know what? There was where I was at yesterday evening working on this. It was in a public space. And as I was in this public space, there were a couple of people I was speaking to just at random, because I do that. Why not? Let's have a chat. It's all worthwhile. There was a couple of people I was speaking to, and they were saying how they hadn't seen each other for about 10, 20 years, some of these people. And do you know what? They all either were holding their phones, had their phones on the table, or were looking at their phones. Sorry, if you haven't seen someone for 10 or 20 years, would you not think that would be the priority? I don't understand it. I really don't. No one can possibly deny that mobile phones are an essential part of a lot of life now, and they're very useful. Okay. If you think of something as, I'll use this as the example actually. On my commute into work, I park at the station car park. Rather than having to faff around with coins at the pay and display machine that could possibly delay me if it doesn't work properly, I could then miss the train. Not that any trains running, but you know what I mean. Instead, now I can do that on the phone. So I can literally leave the car in the car park, go straight to the platform, and I can pay for the parking. Things like that are revolutionary. They're great, right? Really helpful. But then on the other hand, you look at social media or anti-social media, which might be a bit rich given that we're broadcasting this on social media at the moment. But you look at social media or anti-social media, whichever way you want to look at it, and yet people have got more interest in looking at that than they have talking to somebody who's with them. And I find it, I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry. Never done that before. So sorry. Sneezing on air. How unprofessional. Didn't get that on the Today program. I do apologize. Do excuse me. Anyway, the oh dear, whoops. Right, I think I managed to cover my mouth as well. Sorry about that. Anyway, I digress. Could you imagine the way that if you've got a situation where someone is around a dinner table and rather than speaking to somebody in person, they would actually rather be looking at their phone. I pick them up on this. If I go out with friends or family or anything like that, if someone is on their phone when I'm in their company, I will say, excuse me, if someone you're speaking to is more important, why have you not invited them to dinner? And of course, it shuts them down straight away. They get very embarrassed by that. More often than not, we'll actually just turn around and say, oh, so sorry, don't worry, I can wait till later. Yeah, you're blooming right, it can wait till later. Of course it can. If you're in the presence of someone, why do we think it's okay in this day and age to even contemplate looking at a device and not looking at the person with you? Even just as recently as 20, 30 years ago, could you just imagine how ill-mannered it would be perceived and controversial as well to many people with manners to turn around to someone who you're at a, let's say, you're at a dinner party or something like that, right? Good old dinner parties. Remember those? Little cheese balls and melons on stick and stuff like that. Ooh, lovely. But you're at a dinner party, right? And then you are sat at the table conversing with somebody, and then the landline rings. And you go and answer it. There were people who used to take those phones off the hook. Do you remember that? Phone off the hook, so as do not disturb. Perfect. And unfortunately, although we've got do not disturb modes on the phone, the truth is they cause an awful lot of hassle because a lot of people forget to turn them back on. You can actually break do not disturb. A lot of people don't realize this, but do not disturb modes can be deactivated with 2 calls in succession. So if you were to phone somebody twice in a row, quite soon after the first attempt it's engaged. I say engaged, we don't have engaged anymore, do we? The first attempt was, this call is unavailable, or it goes straight to voicemail. If you call straight back, that shatters the do not disturb mode, which means that you can actually get through to someone anyway. And that's even looking back at a sort of a former version of this program where we also talk more about mental health and well-being. I actually think that that's probably sort of some of the most detrimental problems that we have in this day and age is there's no time to turn off, either from work or from social media, where of course we all know there are some detrimental effects of that. But actually, let's look one step further. I've heard horror stories, and I'm sure you have as well, of how the youth, as we wish to call them, would have access to mobile phones, maybe are experiencing some sort of bullying in school, but they can't even go home and get a break from it. They come home and it carries on through the mobile devices. So as much as I understand there are plus points to it, I don't even know how I've gone off on this rant. I'm so sorry. Started off talking about manners, but anyway, as much as I understand that there are plus points to it, one can't deny that there is definitely something amiss with never being allowed or afforded the time to just switch off. I suppose, to be fair, someone could just switch off the phone and then they absolutely wouldn't be disturbed, because even if you tried the do not disturb feature that I was just telling you about, you wouldn't get through to somebody. It's not possible. So Graham Pack needs to turn off on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at midday to watch the show. Well, that's very kind of you, Graham. Thank you. I know that Russ and Neil and everyone on the program would very much appreciate your undivided attention. Thank you. But it's not even about that. It's, as far as I'm concerned, I feel as though that we have, although we have progressed as people, we seem to have gone so backwards in so many respects. It's just absolutely bizarre. A day and age in which we live now that should be the most exciting and the most amazing seems to have turned into some of the most stressful times. And I don't understand how or why. Well, I do, but I don't understand why we've allowed it to happen. There doesn't seem to be any foresight anymore, does there? There doesn't seem to be any forward thinking or bigger picture. And that could actually be taken as given in so many different walks of life. You look at anything from the state of global politics now to various situations in this country. Energy is a classic example of that, right? Look at what's happened to energy bills in this country. Why? Because we don't generate enough of our own energy. And if you remember rightly, back in, I think it was around 2011, it was Nick Clegg, the then Deputy Prime Minister, who he turned around and he said, no, we are not going to build nuclear power stations in this country, bad for the environment. Well, okay, maybe not good for the environment, but at the same time got to be better than what we're using now. And actually, what would have happened is we could have been entirely self-sufficient by now if we had, because he actually said they would take too long. Well, he said they'd take 10 years, and we're now well over 10 years. So just think how quickly it could have come round if we'd gone down that route. Absolutely bizarre. Françoise Pascal. I once sat through a private dinner party where the host was continuing on his mobile phone and apologies every 10 minutes as he was on a business call. This left me with a very bad taste in my mouth. Never saw the couple again. Wow. I don't blame you at all. Because Françoise, you remember actually, it wasn't that long ago that you, me, and my mama, we went off for a spotted dinner together. It was a very nice evening we had. We must do it again soon, by the way. Went off for a spotted dinner together. And we all had a great time because we were talking. I know that really old-fashioned concept. As you can tell, by the way, I like to talk and I can talk. But we were just talking. We were conversing around the dinner table. I don't think at any one stage we ever took our phones out, apart from taking a photo. That was the only time. It was a very nice photo as well. But that was the only time we took phones out. The rest of the time, we were just having a chat, reminiscing, and having a good old laugh. And it was bliss. It was lovely because that's what you're supposed to do. Do we really want to get to a day and age when no one converses with anyone? I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a Disney film called WALL-E. Have you ever seen that? Anyway, WALL-E is a Disney film that is set in the future. I mean, I say thousands of years. I don't think it is thousands of years. I think it's a couple of hundred years in the future, which is quite disturbing. And it's all about how the Earth is shattered. It's quite subliminal. There's an awful lot of subliminal messaging going on. The Earth is shattered, full of rubbish, okay? Full of consumables. Oh, you must remind me, actually, if I forget to do this. I'll probably say this later when Chantal's on. But please remind me to tell you about this documentary I was watching about consumables. Really, really interesting. I will tell you later. Anyway, so back to WALL-E. Full of consumables. The Earth is absolutely smothered in rubbish, or as they call it, trash. Needless to say, it's uninhabitable anymore because it's been damaged to such a degree that it's actually unhealthy to live here. And as a result of it, they send whatever's left of the human race up into space. And the humans are out there in space living on this little ship. Well, it's quite a big ship, actually, to be honest with you. But one of the other subliminal messages they do, talking about communication, is that they have a system where everyone is on a lounger. So you know those lounges you get by a swimming pool? They're all reclined back all the time like that, okay? They're on a lounger, and the loungers float. So they're a bit like the hoverboards in Back to the Future. So there's nothing underneath it. They just sort of float in the air. One might assume there's something to do with gravity as well. Anyway, however, the point is they're on these loungers. Everyone communicates with each other through virtual screens in front of them. So no one talks to each other. They all communicate through these virtual screens. It's absolutely outrageous to think that that could really become reality. And to be honest, it kind of is. If we think about what's happening now, it kind of is becoming a reality. Look at these virtual reality goggles that are out there by various technology companies. You've got Apple has done it, Meta, who are behind Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, and all of that. And I believe that there is another company I've forgotten about that's probably also working on them. Maybe Samsung, I think it is. All of these companies are coming up with these goggles. You literally just put over the eyes and you're submerged in a virtual world, meaning that you don't really talk to anyone in the way you once did. And if these become more normal and they become cheaper, I'm absolutely convinced many people will have them, that many people will walk around the street with them, and they just won't even bother talking. And one of the other things as well that these goggles have, for example, is cinema mode. So this is the ability to watch whatever film you want programmed into it, as if you're in a cinema. So what will happen is that it will give you the impression that you've got a massive screen in front of you. So in the comfort of your own home, you won't even need a television anymore, because you literally sit in front of these goggles and look at this big screen as if you're at the cinema. Now, that might sound great, but don't you think half of the beauty of going to the cinema is going with someone, experiencing the film, hearing someone chewing popcorn behind you and getting very cross with them, and not to mention being able to discuss the film with them afterwards because they've seen it at the same pace, or maybe even reacting at the same time. But no, all of that could go. That could completely disappear. And it's just yet another step towards this world we're going to submerge ourselves in, where we're not going to be able to communicate with one another. where we're not going to even realize that someone is standing next to us. In fact, actually, when I did try one of these pairs of goggles one time, I went into a famous technology shop, tried them, and I did just that. I didn't actually realize I was flailing my arms so much that I nearly knocked out the delightful assistant who was helping me with them and showing me what to do with them. Very embarrassing. Anyway, Francois also goes on to say, by the way, I beg your pardon. That's what Francois goes on to say. That is what it is all about. Talk, not being on our phones. It was a great evening with both of you. Absolutely. I agree. Mark Elvis Hampson says, Francois, it also bugs me when I've been invited round to social dinners and friends are watching television shows and I've just sat there looking around the room until one time I got up and walked out and did not see them for 5 years. Mark, quite right. I don't blame you at all. I'd do exactly the same. It's ridiculous. Don't see the need at all. If you're in the company of people, you should never need the television on. You should never need your phones out. It really is as simple as that. Graham Pack says, they seem great, but will they be a poor take up like the IMAX cinema as it's so expensive? Well, I think it's probably a bit of a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? Because they only become cheaper once they become more popular. But how can they become popular when they're so expensive? Who knows? Speaking of popular and expensive, by the way, I've just seen into the digital green room. Chantal Rickards has appeared. So we shall very quickly be jumping over live to catch up with our little daily dose, or weekly dose, I should say. Actually, daily, it's not daily at all. It's been a daily show for years. What am I talking about? Sorry, our weekly dose of cinema and screen and television delights and all stuff like that. Plus, I might even be able to chime in this conversation. Remind me, I've got to tell you about this consumable show that I've started watching on Netflix. Fascinating. We'll get onto that in just a minute. Heck, you've heard me waffle on enough. Besides, I need to let my throat breathe. Chantal Rickards, a very good afternoon.
Hello, Phil. Do you want to have, go away for 20 seconds and I'll fill for you and you can clear your throat?
It's all good. Thank you.
It's all good.
Hang on in there. Don't you worry. I've sort of trained my throat to be able to waffle indefinitely. So it's just about fine. Thank you, though. But it's very nice to see you again. Second time this week, you poor thing.
Second time this week, indeed. We've had a cinema evening, haven't we?
We did. It was very nice. And actually, don't worry. I did double check and it has been released, that film.
It has been released. Well, we normally talk about things that I've really, really, really liked because I like to pass on nice things to people so that they can, just watch something that's worthwhile. And you and I were a bit ambivalent. Why don't you talk us through it? It's a film called Room Next Door, or The Room Next Door. And it came out about 4 weeks ago. Great cast.
Yeah, look, Tilda Swinton I thought was superb. She really does very well when it comes to acting, because actually, if you think of the variety of roles that she's played over the years, she's never really got it wrong that I can remember. Okay. So no one can ever knock her for her acting, that's for sure. But the problem with this particular film was the premise was about I think they're two authors. No, one was a war correspondent, the other one was an author. And they were obviously friends from many years ago, hadn't seen each other for a while. And then right at the start of the film, at a book signing, obviously for the author, clearly, someone goes up and says, hey, did you hear about whoever this person was, this other character, Martha, I think her name was. Did you hear about Martha? She's got cancer. Anyway, of course, that sparks it into reconnecting with Martha, played by Tilda Swinton, and saying, I want to reconnect and, come and see you. She goes to visit her, and the film is sort of about how her cancer, unfortunately, is diagnosed as terminal, so she's clearly not going to get over it. But she decides, quite aptly, I suppose, given that today is the day when Parliament's discussing the assisted dying bill,
indeed,
she has decided that she wants to end her life. And that is about the journey, if I can use that revolting cliche, that she goes on, to the point of how she comes to the point where she does take her own life. I'm not trying to ruin the end of the film. It's kind of what it's about. It's known that that's the synopsis. And you kind of would like to think that if you're going to watch a film like that, that there'd be something in the way of an emotional roller coaster. And we both said we felt no emotional ties to the film at all.
Yeah, even though, Julianne Moore is a terrific actress. She plays the other part, the other author. And together, they are great on screen. But I think you're absolutely right. It felt a bit like there was an emotional vacuum. And the only jeopardy is towards the end, where the police get involved. We won't go there completely, but the police get involved, and actually I could then feel my heart beginning to sort of, pump a bit
Absolutely. That was like the one time where I thought,
Yeah.
oh, this is starting to get interesting. And then I realized it couldn't go on too long because I knew the duration of the film. So I thought, well, actually, this is going to have to come to a very swift conclusion.
Indeed.
And sure enough, it did.
It did, absolutely, because that sequence lasts about 5 minutes, and then it's all over, and then the end. But it's very well acted. Two magnificent
sure.
actresses who absolutely know what they're doing. Both very sophisticated actresses. Tilda Swinton always, slightly makes me feel like a little small person because she's so striking. She's so articulate. That when you see her in real life, you think, oh my goodness me, there's so much more going on behind the face of the actress. And the same with Julianne Moore, actually. They're both, I think, highly intelligent women. And they're great together. But this film is just a little bit sort of empty, really.
Well, it to me, I think the best summary I could give is because this is to definitely not take away from the acting, which was superb. It felt like we were looking at two big fish in a very small pond.
Yeah.
There was not a lot going on around them.
Yeah.
But they were magnificent.
Yeah.
However, it could have possibly worked better as a stage play. However, so that was that. But what I wanted to tell you about very quickly before I forget was
something about consumables I heard you mention earlier in the show.
So there's this documentary that's on Netflix at the moment. I only just started watching it.
Right.
And although technically speaking, the premise is not enough to draw me in to make me think, oh, I'm going to watch that. Because you sort of know it's about the environment before you begin. And I'm really not interested in someone spouting claptrap to me about the environment. We all know the climate's changing. It has done for many years. But the actual documentary itself is called Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy. And it's about how our consuming habits have changed. And there are a couple of very interesting lines out of it. I haven't watched all of it yet, but it's about how the reason why we're consuming more is because it's so much easier to consume now. So in other words, whereas in years gone by where we had to go to the shops to actually go and look for something, physically look for something, we used to think, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll just repair what I've got. Now we don't have to do that. We look online, we think, I'll just replace it. It's a bit like, for example, today with me, I actually need to get myself a new umbrella. My umbrella broke yesterday, which was irritating. But anyway, the point is that we're in a position now where we can do that. And of course, later on Black Friday, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to look online. I'm going to find myself a nice new umbrella and I'll just probably buy it. But years ago, we would have had to say, no, I'm going to have to get up, physically go to the shops, wander around, find something I like the look of.
Yeah.
And even then, it's whether or not I actually like the price and then buy it. And of course, that would have taken a heck of a lot longer. And now we don't.
No.
So it sort of goes back to what I was saying about the film WALL-E, the way that the earth was just covered in rubbish. And you can sort of understand that that's the direction of travel. So they talk a bit about how the reasons why there's so much more plastics in the ocean is because people are just discarding stuff so willy-nilly as China continues to churn out stuff at the most unbelievable rate.
Indeed. Indeed. And that's a conundrum we cannot solve between now and 1 o'clock.
We can't. You're absolutely right. But it's just, I thought it was worth mentioning. So yeah, it's called Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy. That's on Netflix. Do give it a whirl, because I actually do think it is in between the, as I say, the nonsense they spout about the climate. It is actually quite an interesting documentary.
Okay, is it British or American, out of interest?
I think it's Isn't that weird? I can't remember. I think it's American. It is American. Yes, it's American. Right. And the only thing that I will say is that there's this irritating bit, just to forewarn you now, because probably if I'd have known this, I might not have watched it. But there's this irritating narrative running through it, not so much about climate change, but more about the fact that there is for goodness sake, it's like a smart speaker, if you will. So you know, like the Alexas and your Hey Googles and all of that, it's like those, and it's sort of running in the middle, and it feels a bit pointless. I feel as though that side of it could be removed, the documentary a bit shorter, and it'd be much more interesting. So just to warn you, there's this strange thing in the middle. Anyway, I digress. Chantal.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, good to know, because I like a good documentary, and I haven't spotted that one, so I'll definitely look that out over the weekend. I did very briefly. I was going to mention it just because I think a lot of older people will be taking their grandchildren over the Christmas holidays to Paddington, which I saw last night on my own in the cinema in Wandsworth. I mean, it's lovely to be on my own. Nobody was eating popcorn. Nobody was slurping a pint of Coca-Cola. It was
sorry about that the other day.
But it's for the kids. And I was sort of going there feeling slightly excited because I really enjoyed Paddington 1. And this doesn't quite hit the mark for the grown-ups. So
what do you think of Paddington 2? Because I was a bit worried Paddington 2 was just stretching it out a bit more.
It was, yes. And I think...
And now we're on the 3rd. So this is the Paddington in Peru, is that right?
Paddington in Peru, exactly. It's, yes, the elastics got even more taut, I would say.
I hate it when
there are funny moments, and there is a moment with the sort of star of the show is an umbrella. By the way, have you thought of going to the world's best umbrella shop, which is opposite the British Museum?
The world's best umbrella shop at the British Museum?
If you've never been to that umbrella shop,
I know. It's not James Smith and Son, is it?
I don't know what it's called. I can't remember. It's been there for years and years.
Yeah, I think it's James Smith and Son. It's around Tottenham Court Road area, isn't it?
It is. It's sort of the New Oxford Street. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I have been there. It is phenomenal. I think it's actually the oldest shop in London, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it really? Now that I don't know. I do remember it from my university years, because I was just up the road at university. So I remember it's been there a long time.
I think it opened 1700 and something. I'm fairly sure it's the oldest shop in London.
That's astonishing.
I might have to look that up just to make sure I haven't made a total fool of myself.
All right.
But yes. I have considered it, but I have to tell you that they do play on their novelty.
Okay. Well, it is amazingly well stocked. Now, listen,
I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry. So apparently it was founded in, right, there you go. Typical me, completely exaggerating. It was founded in, it looks like 1860s it was founded.
Okay.
That's not bad. That's pretty old.
Yeah, it's not quite the oldest shop in the country, or indeed in London, but even so, that's it's been around a long time.
Yeah, no, it has. It's pretty old. Is the best way of putting it.
Okay. Right, I'm going to drag.
They have got. Oh, you might like to know they have got the title of Europe's oldest umbrella shop. So there you go.
Europe's okay. Fair enough.
Who wouldn't want that accolade on the above their door?
No, indeed. And much more exciting than going on Amazon. So I think you should take a trip down there this weekend. Now that you've got...
I have to tell you, my aunt and uncle very generously actually did buy me an umbrella there for my 30th birthday, which I still have. But I'm terrified of using it in case I lose it. But I have got it. It's very snazzy.
Yeah, that's really useful, Phil. You can't just keep it in the cupboard.
But
No, that's just silly.
But I'm worried. I don't want to lose it.
No, you do, because the shop is there. You can always replace it. You've got to use it. It's probably a beautiful umbrella.
It is a very beautiful umbrella, has to be said, actually. It's not very big, though. I quite like umbrellas that sort of go wide over to make absolutely sure there's no rain. Have you ever noticed now with a lot of umbrellas that the rain is so sort of flying around all over the place that actually, even if you're holding an umbrella, you still get saturated. There's no point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've got half a dozen of those sort of £2.99 umbrellas that break up.
I'm being told off here, Chantal. Are you ready for this? It was established in 1830. Sorry.
Right. Okay. I think we're going down the umbrella shop rabbit hole, which we...
I was going to say, I bet you're sorry you mentioned that now, aren't you?
I just think if we had any viewers this morning, they've probably turned off or turned over. But anyway, let's try and find something more interesting to talk about. Now,
we've covered that subject.
We've done it. It's over. We've covered it. Quite right. You won't remember, and if you do, then you are an extraordinary person with an extraordinary memory. But we know that there was in the 1980s an American TV series called Matlock, which I don't remember. I'm not even sure it was broadcast in the UK, but somebody will know and somebody will tell us, I'm sure.
This is going to horrify you.
What?
I can't say I've heard of it. I don't think I remember it.
No. Well, it was 80 something. It was on from about 86 to 97. So it was jolly successful in the US. And it was about an attorney who famously charged $100,000 for his time because he was the best lawyer in Atlanta. That is as much as I know about Matlock, other than there is a brand new television series which is on Sky Witness and on Now. And if you've got Now or Sky, it's also on various other platforms as well, but I caught it on Sky Witness. A drama series featuring Kathy Bates, Academy Award winner. I think she's got a Golden Globe, 2 Golden Globes possibly. She's got Emmys, she's got BAFTAs. She's an extraordinary American actress, now age 76. And she is starring as Matlock the lawyer in a completely reworking of the original. So this is the idea is that she hasn't practiced law for 40 years. She suddenly wants to get back into the legal world. She manufactures some crazy notion of how she's going to do that and basically breaks into a lawyer's office and persuades them that they have to take her on board. And she says the best thing about being her age is that nobody notices her, which is very good because then it allows her to pick up things that other people might keep from her because they think that she's, no, she's not really somebody that they would imagine would be canny or clever because she's a lady of later years. In actual fact, she's super sleuth, super smart, and is the heroine of what is only so far the pilot episode, which has been put out there, which I absolutely raced through 2 or 3 nights ago. Got to the end of it and was really infuriated to find out they hadn't put the rest of the series up. The other main character is Beau Bridges, who is 82, I think, one of the famous Bridges brothers, and he is the head of the law firm. But this is not obvious in terms of you think you know what this program is going to be, and then suddenly it isn't. And I'm not going to spoil it by telling you.
The intrigue now, that's not fair.
Yeah. But I was sort of thinking, oh, this is obvious cozy crime. I must tell Russ about this. He's sort of going to love it. And then it becomes something quite different and more clever and more sophisticated. But she is absolutely terrific in it. She terrified me in that film called Misery, if you remember, from 1990, where she played this complete psycho. And here she is clearly, in the same way, she's not quite what she seems. And I will say no more.
Well, Francine Warner remembers Matlock.
Oh!
As does Francois Pascal. She says, I love this series. Matlock was my favorite.
Yeah.
Michelle Vaughan says, great to see you, Chantal. I am loving Matlock.
Wow.
Francois then says that she saw it when she lived in LA. It was starring then Andy Griffiths.
Indeed, it was Andy Griffiths, who's an American actor that sort of passed me by. He's not well known to me, but then maybe my knowledge of 1980s American drama isn't as good as it should be.
Well, I think you can be forgiven.
Yeah, maybe it seems as though
that was pre-BAFTA LA days, so you know.
Anyway, Matlock on Sky Witness or on Now is definitely worth a watch. And if only they were all stacked up waiting for me, I'd watch them all weekend and just not move off the sofa.
You see, you're going back to how we consume things differently now. It wasn't that long ago. We used to wait every week for the next episode.
No, that's true. Well, I mean, some of them still do that. So I'm still watching Day of the Jackal, which came out however many weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever. And they're only putting them out week by week, which I'm finding deeply irritating.
But, I think there are actually quite a few companies that are doing that now, a few productions that are doing it on a weekly basis now. It seems to almost be like a growing trend. It's like they've almost discovered that you don't want to peak too early. And actually, it's true, because how do you guarantee you're going to keep getting those water cooler moments is you keep the conversation going. If you get rid of it in one hit, that's it. You've moved on to the next thing already.
Yeah, I mean, that's what keeps things like Coronation Street and Emmerdale alive and EastEnders, because people chat about them. They are, part of the conversation and a continuing conversation. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite clever. I mean, you can get things in all shapes and sizes, short dramas now. I've seen dramas recently of 18 minutes in duration. You think, how can you actually build up excitement and a story in 18 minutes and then go to the closing credits and you think,
tell me about it. We couldn't even manage that. I couldn't even be managed the other day in 2 hours. So how do you do it in 20 minutes?
very difficult. But I don't know, look at TikTok. They're managing to pull it off.
Do I have to? Do I have to? Please.
Well, talking about social media, I'm going to mention again one of my favorite documentary series on Channel 4. That there's a new episode out of that. We haven't seen it on air for about 6 months, called 24 Hours in Police Custody. And it is a really, really classy piece of program making, and allows you to see a story unfolding from the moment something dramatic happens in a real life crime. And then most of the story is taken up with how the police interrogate that person afterwards. So there's a setup of about 10 minutes, and then the rest is normally the interrogation. And this is a story of 2 young people who have just broken up, young people in their 30s. And suddenly they both start getting harassing text messages. And the story unfolds cleverly, and it always carefully done. There's a brand new sort of trainee copper who's been given this this case to work on as the officer in charge for the first time, a young woman in her 30s. And she's just sort of tiptoeing her way through the story. And the story is crazy. And social media is absolutely a massive thing. Harassment comes in many forms, most particularly social media these days. Stalking can be done through social media. One of the charities I used to work with ran the National Stalking Helpline. And one has this idea that it's just people being followed down a street by somebody in a black coat. It's not like that anymore. As you know, social media is or can be used as a horrible weapon. Anyway, the story of these 2 young people is extraordinary. Channel 4, watch it, 24 Hours in Police Custody. It's revelatory is all I would say. But it's
the same people who do 24 Hours in A&E, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very. I mean, it's been going 10 years, this series. And I can remember watching it for the first time thinking, wow, that is access that one had never seen before of the story of how it unfolds with the police and the perpetrator in custody. And it still shocks me every time I see it.
Well, I'd like to think most of us don't actually know what it's like to even be in police custody. So I suppose that is probably why it's a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
But it is, I think I actually quite like, although it is obviously some of the cheapest television, not necessarily the easiest to edit, but it is some of the cheapest television, to just do fly on the wall.
Yeah. I mean, the setup costs are quite a lot, Phil, and you have to overshoot by masses.
That's what I say. Production-wise, it's not cheap at all.
Obviously, they're not paying the police, they're not paying the criminals, they're not paying the other contributors to be in a documentary. I mean, that still holds pretty much true everywhere, is that you don't pay people to appear in documentaries because they are supposed to be there to tell a true story as opposed to be an actor. So yeah, that's still the case. I'm quite sure that people won't have been paid other than maybe a small facility amount for having cameras in their home for a day or something like that.
I think it just panders to one of the most basic human sensations, I suppose, which is intrigue. People are always fascinated at seeing other people's lives, for no other reason, just to probably compare it to their own. But look at series like Big Brother, as you say, 24 Hours in Police Custody, 24 Hours in A&E, and any of these reality shows as well. I mean, reality is anything but reality, of course. But reality shows in the way that they sort of try and imply that you're watching someone in their natural habitat or what have you. Yeah. I think people do have this overwhelming need to know that things are not necessarily, especially with social media actually now, that things are not necessarily only good and bad in their own world. Especially social media itself seems to paint people more often than not in a really good light. They'll actually sort of say, look at me, I'm on holiday today. Look at me, I'm not working today. Isn't this amazing? I'm having this amazing dinner. they don't really take a photo of the Weetabix they had that morning because it's not as exciting as when they go out to dinner. They're not going to take a photo of them lounging in their tracksuit on the sofa watching TV because that's not as excited about lounging on a lounger in the sun. So I think just it's a given that more than ever we need reminders that sometimes things aren't great for everyone. And that's kind of what these shows actually do, I feel.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's there. Go watch it. If you've never seen it before, try it out. If it's not your thing, fine. But it is a very, very well-made piece of television. Which brings me on to another well-made piece of television, which is a hard watch, a really, really hard watch. National Geographic are commemorating, I was going to say celebrate, but that's totally the wrong word, commemorating the 20-year anniversary of the tsunami, the Indian Ocean tsunami.
20 years?
20 years.
Wow.
It took 225,000 lives. I had not realized until I read up on it earlier. I hadn't realized actually how extensive it was. And I felt as though I'd seen all the footage before, because there have been lots of very good documentaries, and there in fact have been dramas about it too. But this is very authoritative. Yes, there are the stories of the people who were there, but it's cut against the story of the scientists, most particularly the scientists in America, who could see what was happening and were trying to warn the Far East and Southeast Asia in real time about what was happening and what was coming, and their frustrations at there not being in a sort of emergency service like there is in the Western world, if you like, where a volcano happens, they all know about it, they all phone each other, they all get on text messages and goodness knows what. But there wasn't that system in the Indian Ocean. So you get this really sort of sad story, but interesting story of geography played out by these American scientists who were sitting there watching it happen and getting worse and not being able to do anything about it to warn people. It's absolutely fascinating. It's a 4-part series. I've watched the first couple of episodes. I have to say I sobbed at the end of episode 1 and I thought, can I carry on watching this? But it's such a good program, and it's a story that deserves to be told. And the story
that's on National Geographic. I'm
and it's
just watch list as we speak.
Yeah, Tsunami Race Against Time, 4-parter on Nat Geo, which is on most people's Sky feeds. But in other
it's also on Disney Plus, by the way.
So. Oh, it's on Disney Plus. I didn't know that.
Well, so Disney Plus has National Geographic. So
right. Oh, okay. It's made by Blast Films, which is a very good British documentary company. Anything that they make is worth watching, and this is very well done. And it does pull at the heartstrings, but the footage is astonishing, and the story is a story of our time, sadly.
Did you ever see the Imposter?
The Imposter. I loved The Imposter. It was one of my
no, not The Imposter. Sorry, The Impossible.
The Impossible. No, tell me about The Impossible.
The Impossible was based on the tsunami.
No, I don't think I did see it.
So it was a film from early 2010s. Let me look. 2012 it was from. So it was a film from 2012. It was called The Impossible. It was about this family who were on holiday in Thailand at the time of the tsunami, and when they got caught up with it and how they dealt with the aftermath as well. Very, very, very good film.
Okay. No, I'm almost sure I haven't seen it, so I will dig it out.
It's just whilst you mentioned the tsunami, it just suddenly thought of it, because it was obviously based on what happened 20 years ago. Oh my goodness me! I can't believe it was that long.
Yeah. Anyway, so for a bit of comedy, Phil,
what a good idea! Yes,
I was thinking, you're not an only child, are you? You've got a sister.
I'm not. No, I have a sister.
Oh, I was going to say, and I'm one of 6, so I'm definitely not an only child. But you've
got a few birthdays to remember.
When my mum was getting elderly, there were 6 of us to share the experience of that and the workload. But there's a very nice new series on BBC One called Only Child, And the basic story is about young man in his relatively young man in his 40s, who's an actor in London, playing in a part that he thinks is going to go into second series. Series 1 has been very successful. And he goes home to see his dad, who he hasn't been to see in Scotland for a year since his mother had died. And to see how he's getting on, and basically just wants to do a quick turnaround and come back to do the second series of this crime drama that he's in London, and it doesn't quite go according to plan. It's one of those bittersweet comedies that's got sort of comedy and pathos in abundance. Some beautifully written lines. Gregor Fisher, who was Rabsy Nesbitt, if you remember Rabsy Nesbitt.
Oh yes.
Plays the dad, the old man.
Oh, he doesn't. For goodness, he's not old enough, surely.
Oh, he is. He is definitely old enough.
Oh my goodness me! I thought you were going to say he plays the actor who goes to visit his dad.
No. He plays the old man. Greg McHugh is the chap who plays the son. And they get to know each other in a completely different way. And needless to say, something happens and the son has to stay with his father, or needs to stay with his father for some time. So it isn't the quick weekend turnaround. And there are some laugh out moments, which are, really, really good, funny, laughing comedy. And there are others that are just absolute sweetness and light. And I identified with bits of it. And I was thinking, I can remember when I had to do that for Mum, or something that Mum did, you just realized was a little bit bonkers and she needed help with, or dealing with social services, or whatever it may be. And actually, this is beautifully written and it's really worth a watch. They're only 25, 27-minute episodes. There are only 6 of them so far. I'm halfway into episode 2, but I'm enjoying what I see. Episode 1 really had some nice laugh out moments. And just, it's a lovely situational comedy. Yeah.
Excellent. And where is that? So it's on the BBC, you say?
BBC One, yeah. I think it started this week, almost sure it started this week. But it's it's nice and gentle, and yes, there are sad moments, but there are some good smiley moments too.
I just don't know whether or not I could ever sort of see a comedy as a comedy in this day and age, knowing that how heavily it is censored now. I was watching this morning just because I don't know why it flashed up on ITVX. I thought, oh yeah, why not? Let's watch it for fun. I've seen it several times. I know virtually all the lines. The Vicar of Dibley.
Do you know, I never got into The Vicar of Dibley. I didn't get it.
Jaw drops to the floor. Good Lord.
I know, it's real.
I never got Father Ted, but Vicar of
Dibley.
Oh,
well, I loved Father Ted. But as an Irish Catholic, I would like Father Ted.
So Vicar of Dibley for me was just, I loved how groundbreaking it was through silliness.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about Vicar of Dibley.
Yeah.
And just watching it back now, I mean, I think it started in the early 90s, if my memory serves, something like 93, 94 it might have been, and it started. But it might not have been. I'm sort of very good at misguessing dates today. So let's see, the Vicar of Dibley. Let's have a look. So we know for all well. Let's see, Vicar of Dibley started in, it started in, oh, good Lord, 1992.
Oh, gosh.
So there you go. Anyway, but as far as Vicar of Dibley is concerned, it was just more, it was the silliness that people used to say things that they knew that would offend, but they didn't care it offended. It was just funny. And now you just couldn't imagine doing it in case someone does get offended. You just think, why? You've got to laugh at life. If we can't laugh, we're just going to get depressed.
But I think I've said it before, but that's why now a lot of comedy is going back to 70s, 80s, 90s, to a place where you can get away with comedy that wasn't, that the woke police hadn't got their hands on, because it was completely acceptable. I mean, this has been slightly polished, but not so much that it takes the really good comedy out of some stuff that used to be incredibly funny and still is in the right context. So, but you can see that's why Life on Mars works so well. is because it was so inappropriate that you see it in a completely different way. I mean, the way that
it's true, because they went back in time, they could actually do it.
Yeah.
Speaking of going back in time, I'm afraid we have to go forward in time. Chantal, we are out of time, but thank you very much indeed for joining me and keeping me company for the last
I'll
half hour.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, see you next week, and we'll hopefully see you as well. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in today. Russ is back with Neil on Monday. See you then. Bye.